exactly are the differences between Marvel and DC Comics?
Of course, they are both in the superhero business, the same way Chevy and Ford are in the car business. They share obvious similarities.
But in today's day and age, who gives a shit what we all have in common?
In fact, a sadly underreported statistic proves the subtle but observable differences between Marvel and DC are responsible for the vast majority of nerd-on-nerd hate crimes.
Regardless of which side you fall on the comic book aisle, the time period of 1986 to 2011 was when DC comic books converged into a single, unified, living, breathing work of art, a time period lovingly referred to as post-crisis.
But with a new era came new challenges.
Even if DC redefined the comic book medium with 3 back-to-back-to-back groundbreaking hits,
in the same year,
DC still weren't the cool kids on the block.
It really wasn't a contest. From the late 70s to mid-80s, Marvel had redefined, grounded, and rocketed the X-Men into space as an allegory for ostracization during the Cold War.
The Incredible Hulk only really exists because Bruce Banner was a victim of child abuse.
Spider-Man was edgy but always lovable. Daredevil was revamped as a blind ninja lawyer dealing with constant heartbreak. Even topics like grief and cancer were covered with the death of Captain Marvel.
Marvel superheroes struggled with their own mortality, and the general tone of Marvel Comics reflected the United States' cultural angst during an era of nuclear proliferation, integration, and a growing distrust in authority.
There seemed to be a place for weighty stories at Marvel Comics, pulled off with gravitas and cheesy action-packed stuff.
There was room for superpowered buddy cop team-ups, modern-day Beauty and the Beast tales, Frog Thor, spy thrillers, and even space operas.
So maybe Marvel had better world building, and that's probably because, let's say, 70% of all Marvel characters lived in one city.
To be conservative.
Any way you look, DC lost a lot of ground to Marvel late in the Silver Age and throughout the Bronze Age of comics.
All of that's going on right when the entire United States is starting to look a lot like a metropolis.
With more Americans living in cities designed for automobile traffic, people weren't walking past newspaper stands where comics have been sold since their inception.
The emergence of chain supermarkets saw people ditch their local mom and pop shops who were more likely to carry comic books.
And when you consider the rapidly growing popularity of video games and premium TV options, the cosmology of DC Comics had the most to gain and the most to lose.
Making us reconsider just how risky Crisis on Infinite Earths truly was.
It was an immense undertaking that took total stock of the entire publishing line, only to throw it out the window. It was unprecedented.
And if Crisis wasn't so good, fans would have felt alienated, rejecting anything to follow. Pre-Crisis, lots of characters lived on different sides of the country, planet, solar system, reality, dimension, or even timeline.
No more. Crisis on Infinite Earths gave us our setting, and History of the DC Universe gave us a loose timeline. Post-Crisis, the DC Universe would feel much more connected because guest appearances, crossovers, and events were normalized.
With a clean slate and renowned talent, experimentation with their characters nurtured nuanced character growth, so the entire universe felt powerfully intimate and cohesive. DC's post-Crisis era is notable because it was simple.
Okay, maybe not all that simple, but it was logical. The tone of the comic matched the character. The crossovers had a purpose. The world building was obvious.
Canon can be tricky, if not impossible to cover in its entirety.
After all, in 1986, DC put out nearly 50 different series, one-shots, and maxi-series. And the fact that we haven't even introduced ourselves yet should clue you into the fact that we have too much to talk about.
Still, here we present New Earth's relative canon and continuity from about 1986 to roughly 1991.
To be clear, this is the mainline New Earth canon. The mature themes instigated by Crisis on Infinite Earths Watchmen, and The Dark Knight Returns were just starting to shape DC and the industry. With all that out of the way, I'm Action Jackson.
Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Task Force BJ, and this is Decrypting the Cosmology of DC Comics, post-Crisis.
After Crisis on Infinite Earths, the big question was this necessary, and/or how is this any different?
At the absolute least, the characters had to feel different.
And while everyone got a contemporary update, the Trinity, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, best encapsulate the benefits of a fresh start.
Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman are the focal points for the major genres and themes found across the wider cosmology.
For those who don't like Superman, John Byrne's Man of Steel may change your tune.
Out the gate, Man of Steel lets you know things are very different from any pre-Crisis iteration of the character.
The heavy sci-fi origin and revamped Kryptonian culture result in a Superman tale as intriguing as it is humbling.
Man of Steel seamlessly balances the life of Clark Kent and the action of Superman, actively challenging even deep-seated biases against the character.
Byrne draws Superman exactly how you would imagine Superman should look. The more grounded tone works to the title's benefit. Superman is clearly inexperienced and has a lot to learn.
Yet, the series never forgets it's a comic book.
After all, Superman does cure blindness with bizarro dandruff.
But the way characters interact is just so believable. On top of that, post-Crisis Superman is extraordinarily less powerful than his pre-Crisis self.
For example, he has to hold his breath in space the first few times he leaves orbit, which makes reading all preceding Superman comics all the more interesting, as the character learns how powerful he truly is with the audience.
We should also mention pre-Crisis Lex Luthor was mostly a stock standard mad scientist. This is the series where he became a crude, conniving businessman, obsessed with his ego while espousing how much he helps everyone.
Yes, he was modeled after Donald Trump. Yes, really. Until fairly recently, Man of Steel was hailed as perhaps the Superman origin. Just do yourself a favor. Don't look into the creative's personal opinions. They might kinda ruin the experience for you.
Instead, we want to set a quick precedent here. Decrypting the cosmology of DC Comics was never intended to comment, speculate, or react to the personal lives, opinions, or politics of any given comic creator, especially those still with us. Sometimes we might have to just to make sense of the comic we're talking about. Thankfully, Man of Steel is not one of those times. It's a pretty straightforward affair, like when we see Superman meet Batman for the first time.
Who, after teaming up with Superman, says something along the lines of, "In a past life, we might have even been friends."
This is an innocent callback to DC's pre-Crisis continuity, where Superman and Batman were the best of pals.
But if Superman knew what heinous shit Batman was getting into in Frank Miller's Batman Year One, we doubt he would have agreed.
It also turns out, Batman Year One is one of the best comic books of all time.
For new readers, we refuse to taint your reading of the genesis of Batman's modern, darker mythos.
So instead, we will dedicate a whole spoiler-heavy episode to the entirety of Frank Miller's Batman. Just not today.
We wouldn't think of Batman as we do without Frank Miller's update, but simply put, Wonder Woman had the most to gain post-Crisis.
George Perez's updated origin recenters Wonder Woman squarely within the heart of Greek myth, making Diana far more complex than some other DC characters around.
3,000 years ago, some of the old gods of Greek myth created a chosen race of women that will lead mankind into a new era of peace. But Ares, god of war, was insulted the gods chose to create a peaceful race of women rather than embrace the warring tribes of men. So he swears revenge with a good old-fashioned maniacal laugh. Undiscouraged, the remaining old gods went to the Well of Rebirth and released the Amazonian souls into the world.
Except for one particular soul, that is.
Queen Hippolyta is the first to rise from the sea and embrace the light of creation, with her sisters following shortly.
The Amazons lived in prosperity until Hercules influenced by Ares, tried to conquer them.
And in one of the most epic takedowns of toxic masculinity, Hippolyta embarrasses Hercules.
But Hercules, being a dick,
despite what Disney wants you to think,
We know! I know! You know.
deceives the queen, suing for peace and throwing a big party, only to fucking roofie Hippolyta so his people can capture, violate, and pillage every Amazonian body.
Hippolyta is met with the visage of Athena to reassure her daughter that vengeance will not save her people. Only cleansing their souls will free them. Fortunately for the Amazons, cleansing your soul also means overthrowing, emasculating, and killing your captors.
Soon enough, the Amazons escape and arrive on Paradise Island, Themyscira.
Even though they are removed from man's world, Athena demands the Amazons keep the bracelets Hercules shackled them in as a reminder of their bondage.
In her sorrow, Queen Hippolyta begs the old gods for a daughter, going so far as to sculpt a body out of Paradise Island's magical clay, praying to the very gods that allowed her sisters to suffer.
But it turns out that the special soul we discussed earlier is Wonder Woman's essence. The soul brings life to the clay, and upon maturity, she will lead the Amazons to usher humanity toward a new, peaceful age.
Mileage may vary on how much you enjoy the title.
After all, Wonder Woman's updated origin explicitly stems from the rape of her people.
Nonetheless, the book exudes female empowerment, and Wonder Woman rejects victimhood.
Wonder Woman is a warrior who prefers peace, but won't hesitate to lop off a head if needed. An interesting piece of characterization that makes Diana more dynamic compared to Batman or Superman.
After Princess Diana of the Amazons glows up, wins the rightful spot as champion of her people, and defeats Ares, Wonder Woman finally enters the eyes of the public during the events of Legends.
Say what you will about crossover events now, but in the late 80s, their intent was sound: cohesion.
Event comics are a unique way to expand the scope of a story so that it may be told more efficiently, spotlighting new titles or characters, and sell a shit ton more comics.
So let's talk about the first post-crisis crossover events, just to see how they add to the DC cosmology.
The American public is conscious of the growing problem that is the meta-human menace.
40 years before people concerned themselves with the proliferation of fake news, Superman, Batman, and the Justice League experienced just how disastrous sensationalism, populism, and nationalism can be when paired with other ideologies.
In this instance, that ideology is anti-life.
So, the Phantom Stranger, who may or may not be responsible for the death of Christ, makes a bet with Darkseid, waging that the people of Earth would never turn against their heroes.
Darkseid is more than happy to accept the challenge, sending one of his underlings to infiltrate the media as the television host, G. Gordon Godfrey.
Godfrey is like Bill O'Reilly, Ellen DeGeneres, Jerry Springer, and the entire cast of The View all rolled into one person.
As a result, he is a massive shit talker, smearing the public image of metahumans, the scientific name for superheroes.
Godfrey's rhetoric incites Shazam to accidentally kill his enemy. At the same time, Darkseid's monster Brimstone appears and beats the Justice League Detroit team into submission, causing them to disband.
And honestly, we're just proud a team led by Aquaman and the Martian Manhunter made it this far.
But their public failure causes the country to descend into mob justice. One of those mobs even beats Robin half to death.
The only way that we could know that for sure is if we were to beat him again.
As a response, Ronald Reagan signs an executive order outlawing metahumans.
Then we get one of the strongest character introductions in the history of the medium.
Amanda Waller, advisor to the White House's metahuman affairs.
Waller reconvened Task Force X, a Black Ops group acting on behalf of the United States as a zero-liability solution, colloquially known as the Suicide Squad. Her operative Rick Flag leads the supervillains: Captain Boomerang, Bronze Tiger, Deadshot, and the Enchantress in their first mission, fuck up Brimstone.
With the Suicide Squad victorious, the public is left to believe that supervillains are the world's finest.
Public perception of superheroes nosedives, to the point where Dr. Fate gathers New Earth's legends: Batman, Blue Beetle, Black Canary, Shazam, Beast Boy, the New Flash, Wally West, Green Lantern, the Martian Manhunter, Superman, and Wonder Woman.
Unfortunately, the metahumans are now face to face with an angry mob of ordinary citizens. But then, in the most 1980s thing ever, a bunch of kids show up, convince their parents how wrong they are, and that the superheroes are actually nice guys.
Just like that, G. Gordon Godfrey turns and bitch slaps a little girl. His heinous action breaks the influence he held on the American public, finally allowing them to think independently. Then, Godfrey accidentally lobotomizes himself.
Yeah, Darkseid's Machiavellian plan is thwarted by a pack of street kids, an incident best described as perfectly aged Spielbergian cheese. But really, Legends was DC's neat way to equate their characters with the most biblical of stories.
In this case, the Book of Job is almost faithfully adapted, where the devil and God make a bet to see if they can break the spirit of Simon. As opposed to Marvel's superheroes of the time, who were generally misunderstood role models, DC attempted to present their characters as modern history's first flaunting with godhood.
But if Bible references aren't nerdy enough for you, we think Legends is also allegoric to how parents reacted to comic books in the Golden Age.
Just as Frederick Wertham said comics were a danger to America's youth and moral fabric, the fictitious G. Gordon Godfrey claimed that legends, vigilantes, and heroes were all a threat to the public.
In both cases, the sensationalist media propensity to take advantage of American citizens coerced the nation into actions that were against her better interests.
The rebooted Origins and first crossover succinctly shows what you will find in a DC comic going forward. Gods who just so happen to encapsulate the adventure science fiction, action mystery, and fantasy myth genres.
The Trinity are the building blocks of the DC universe, and their individual differences manifest into the defining genres of the cosmology.
Legends exemplifies how those genres can mesh together so well, and subplots involving horror, romance, or comedic elements would naturally fill in the rest of the plot.
But through it all, one thing is made crystal clear. DC superheroes are mostly gods.
Unlike Marvel Comics, where most people are A-OK with capital S superheroes, DC's post-crisis superheroes would be met with a level of skepticism by a fictional public coming to grips with a prospering race of superpowered gods.
Legends was an excellent springboard for new series like the Suicide Squad, also spotlighting characters DC now had unlimited access to, eventually giving us
At the worst of times, the Justice League series is a crossover, and at the best of times, an event.
And with public trust in the heroes hardly restored, it seems the only proper thing to do is form a brand new Justice League.
The global threats don't stop coming, and a new Justice League gotta hit the ground running. By using lesser known characters, the title had nowhere to go but up, and for many, is the definitive league.
The Martian Manhunter would be the only returning member from the original roster.
For many people, including us here at the Comics Quest, J'onn is the heart of the Justice League. But more importantly, this is the series where the Manhunter discovers his love of Oreos.
Shazam and Blue Beetle's inclusion represent DC's various business acquisitions from throughout their pre-crisis history. Comparatively, Dr. Fate and Black Canary harken back to DC's in-house Golden Age legacy.
Guy Gardner, the Green Lantern, is an update to his Silver Age counterpart.
Mr. Miracle's presence of course honors Jack Kirby's contributions to the DC pantheon.
Dr. Light is there because DC most certainly forgot they let her survive the crisis on Infinite Earths. And Batman is Batman, so of course he's there.
Giffen, DeMatteis, and company revitalized the team to face contemporary issues. The title came out at the peak of the Cold War, so an international team of superheroes challenging hostile governments was and is intrinsically topical.
But the book is also hilarious, in contrast to other contemporary titles trying to ape the dark motifs found in The Watchmen or The Dark Knight Returns.
Of course, no mention of the JLI would ever be complete without honoring the famous One Punch moment.
Sadly, the team's popularity waned over time, despite constant roster changes that reflected the book's title changes.
For the time, this was the most eclectic, extensive, and powerful team DC had ever assembled, reasserting the Justice League to be at the forefront of the DC universe.
It turns out that Millennium is difficult to parse through in its entirety, with its 45 different issues that have never been reprinted or recollected. You would think a story that gave way for a cocaine-powered supervillain would be more fondly remembered, but alas.
Regardless, Millennium's big takeaways are that New Earth is now on the intergalactic map. And I guess a bunch of characters you really don't care about were actually Manhunters from Green Lantern lore this whole time, which in some way leads to aliens, yes, space aliens, instigating a wholesale invasion on the Earth, because fuck Australia.
Their ultimate weapon, a gene bomb intended to turn off a metagene.
Still, those stupid ass aliens accidentally activated a latent metagene in some humans, thus giving them superpowers.
The gene bomb was a useful plot device for years to come as an explanation for new heroes and villains alike. Strangely, DC released 2 wide-scale alien-themed events in the same year.
We feel it's safe to say Millennium and Invasion certainly did not help the perception that DC features the lesser cosmic mythos.
Yet, without the gene bomb, no Grant Morrison Doom Patrol.
DC had to know New Earth's cosmic debut was, pardon our language and brutal criticism, weak sauce. As a response, DC released what is, for our money, their definitive cosmic story.
The esteemed Jim Starlin teamed with the now iconic Mike Mignola, both supported by the prestigious John Workman and one of our favorite inkers, Carlos Garzón, and the unspoken talent, Steve Oliff.
The end result is a deeply moody and atmospheric journey that can only be described as a cosmic odyssey.
It is an unspoken gemstone that we as a species were probably never meant to stumble upon.
It may never be outdone in how it makes the most of the characters involved.
We are convinced that if the fine folks at Warner Brothers DC genuinely wanted to get their cinematic universe off the ground, this is the story to adapt.
On adaptations, should James Gunn direct a sequel to The Suicide Squad? The Janus Directive is the logical place to go.
Well, I don't give a fuck on account I never knew Janice in the first place.
The Janus Directive features super espionage and corporate intrigue, following legends. Clandestine groups like the Suicide Squad and Checkmate compete for dominance.
The title shrugs off superhero tropes, quickly evolving into a thriller.
If you are craving a story that is 40% John Wick,
9mm pit viper,
20% snakes on a plane,
I have had it with these motherfucking snakes.
and 40% Metal Gear Solid,
Snake, are you okay? Snake? Snake?
then look no further than the Janus Directive.
Truthfully, the series is a welcome change of pace in lieu of your suspected superheroics.
Nowadays, we are inundated with anti-heroes, but in the 80s, mainstream comics were still somewhat beholden to the CCA.
So for a team of killers, liars, cheats, and thieves to strike lightning as they did was very impressive, further opening the door for more nuanced takes on typically flamboyant supervillains.
If you don't believe us, this series was the first time Peacemaker debuted as a leading character in a proper DC comic.
What makes the Janus Directive so good is its focus. Not a single issue is wasted. dedicating an entire portion of the Cosmology to counterintelligence and espionage.
You start liking Janice, you know what I mean? You start getting invested in her, you go, God damn, that Janice is a cool lady.
While we have your attention, we would like to go on record when we claim nothing good ever comes of time travel.
In comics specifically, think about it. X-Men Days of Future Past, Age of Ultron, Age of Apocalypse, Future's End, Zero Hour, and of course, Armageddon 2001.
Our personal grievances aside, Armageddon 2001 starts very promising.
It is the far future of 2001. The world, its icons, ways of life, and heroes have all been relegated to a distant memory. At some point in the past, a war between Earth and Apocalypse erupted. A hero killed Darkseid and betrayed humanity, leaving that hero standing as the Monarch.
In 2001, a scientist named Jack Ryder stumbles upon a conspiracy involving the true identity of the Monarch.
Too bad that by using the finest 1984 spy technology, Monarch finds Jack Ryder and sends him to 1991 as punishment to prove the Monarch is inevitable. Monarch even gives Ryder powers just because they are so confident.
By the end of the first issue, you're sold. A visually striking character with a compelling cause, a time travel mystery, a Darkseid slaying hero falling to the dark side? Yeah.
Things go downhill quickly. Jack Ryder, now Wave Rider, makes an appearance in all the popular titles.
In every instance, the tie-ins rule out who the Monarch could not be.
The audience is told that Monarch is not a female, Superman, Batman, or Hawkman. We are explicitly told that Monarch cannot be the C-list, okay fine, the D-list character, the Avatar of War, Hank Hall, aka Hawk.
And the list of suspects grows shorter and shorter.
This is where things get sticky. As the story grew to encompass the entire publishing line, more and more industry talent and insiders discovered the planned villainous reveal. And then someone leaked the Monarch's identity to be none other than Captain Atom.
Captain Atom was created by Steve Ditko in 1960 and eventually introduced to DC Comics during Crisis on Infinite Earths. However, the character had yet to receive the same exposure that some of his Charlton comic peers had. Steve Ditko, you may also recognize as the co-creator of Spider-Man, was a man of principle, maybe explaining why you haven't heard of him.
So Marvel might have killed two birds with one stone, ruining DC's summer event and forever tarnishing the legacy of one of their former employees who also just so happens to be among the most important voices in the history of the medium.
In a scramble, DC rushed to alter the ending, so readers didn't have months of anticipation ruined for them.
But the public knew who Monarch was, who the Monarch was not, and there was no contingency plan.
Now we know what you're thinking. DC could have chosen anyone, really, but instead they threw their hands in the air and decided Hawk was actually the villainous Monarch.
But just a few issues ago, we were told that it couldn't be Hawk?
Creating a glaring continuity error that would end up ruining yet another of Steve Ditko's creations.
Nonetheless, DC stuck to the backup plan they didn't have, and Hank Hall, aka Hawk, was Monarch.
2001 Monarch travels to 1991 to kill Dove, the current partner to his former self. Dove's death sends Hawk into a blind rage, killing Monarch, inadvertently creating a time paradox.
Hawk killing Monarch in 1991 is the inciting incident that puts Hawk on a warpath, leading him to become Monarch in the future.
And then Wave Rider's like,
time paradoxes are a no for me,
eradicating the 2001 timeline he and the Monarch came from.
Because to never have existed is a better alternative than a shitty life, I guess?
I think the lesson learned from this whole thing is to keep your super secret mystery villain's identity to yourself. And we may catch some heat for this, but no one cares about Hawk.
Comment down below how you have 3 copies of every Hawk comic ever printed. Asshole.
Many have tried, but no one has been able to fix the whole Hawk Monarch dilemma even 3 decades after it was initially released. In summary, it's a good idea to have a hero fall to the dark side. Maybe next time just make it someone people have actually heard of. And if at all possible, avoid time travel. Or don't.
Wonder Woman War of the Gods is the first Wonder Woman-centric comic book event, but it pains us to inform you all it is not her best story.
In the broadest of strokes, Circe, the second, third, or maybe even fourth most notable Wonder Woman villain, stokes a war between the old gods.
And just like that, a whole bunch of other gods are culturally appropriated into the DC cosmology. From real-world Aztec or Mesopotamian deities, to even fictitious gods from Hawkman's homeworld.
And at time of publishing are heroes who come from some scientific, magical, alien, or etymological power had never faced the unbridled might of divine entities. But premise is only so much, and execution is everything.
So while Hercules gets his much-deserved comeuppance, and Lobo steals the issues he's in, we feel that DC didn't really support the title.
We are very forgiving when it comes to any comic book artist, but the art in the core series is shockingly inconsistent.
Wonder Woman isn't really in the book.
We repeat, Wonder Woman is not in it that much.
Instead, her supporting cast do a lot of the heavy lifting to explain what the fuck is going on. Diana's absence results in a lopsided read that fleshes out the cosmology while not doing much in terms of refining the title character.
The weird pacing does the series no favors.
Wonder Woman never has her triumphant moment, leading the reader to wonder if any of this really impacted the cosmology at all.
Having said all that, War of the Gods does explain that all origins of creation are equal to one another, and we really dig that as a creative choice and the repercussions it has across the grander cosmology. Even still, we can't wholeheartedly recommend the series to you. Wonder Woman just deserves better.
Post-Crisis on Infinite Earths, the DC Comics cosmology was the most solid it has ever been.
Canon was apparent. Continuity finally meant something. Superheroes were grounded. Supervillains had agency. And a consistent tone across all titles conveyed the magnitude of DC's new direction.
Post-Crisis, smaller characters were relegated to irregular miniseries with the occasional guest appearance here and there.
A major far cry from DC's young history, where a single comic could feature a handful of smaller characters supporting the title act.
One of the many trade-offs from the pre-Crisis era carrying into DC comic books even today is that smaller characters appear less frequently, but when they get a miniseries, they tend to be critically praised.
Nonetheless, DC imitated the competition where they needed to. World building.
New readers didn't have to worry about the inconsistencies that came with the multiverse.
Instead, the interconnections between the universe would be obvious, and that sounds f***ing silly today, but it should stand in clear contrast to the 5 decades of comics DC published pre-Crisis.
As alluded to, DC also set themselves apart from Marvel by presenting their characters as gods under the guise of superheroes. Unlike most Marvel superheroes who are humans trying to act super, DC superheroes were gods trying to find a place among humanity.
Like they beat the old gods, and instead of immediately oppressing humanity for its faith in false idols, they keep their day jobs. Just to have something relatable to talk about, and that's cool, I guess.
But there is another big difference we have yet to mention.
A lot of the discourse circling DC Comics insinuates that they are darker or even more mature than their largest competitor.
For example, DC Comics may have published the first comic book where a superhero commits suicide, as seen in 1988's Vigilante number 50.
As if child drug addiction weren't mature enough, now main characters are killing themselves. But calling DC Comics dark comic simply because realistic things can and do happen overlooks the fact That hope is never lost in the pages of any DC title.
But yes, post-Crisis, DC was starting to feel like a lot darker place. But make no mistake, DC was not alone.
Yet, even after the release of seminal classics like The Watchmen, The Dark Knight Returns, The Killing Joke, Batman Year One, Cosmic Odyssey, Hellblazer, Mark Waid's The Flash, Animal Man, and Doom Patrol, Marvel was and still is the comic titan.
We've mentioned it before, but DC lost its market dominance during the growth of the counterculture movement in the 60s. Since then, Marvel Comics has been the comic book top banana.
But sales numbers had been declining for everyone since the 70s, and DC needed a win more than most.
Crisis on Infinite Earths was the first in a series of big wins that helped make these classic stories possible in the first place.
If we didn't make it abundantly clear, the post-Crisis era is quite possibly the most interconnected DC has ever felt.
Between ongoing series, events, and the invention of DC's coveted imprint Vertigo Comics, characters who had never been successful on their own finally had the opportunity to grow in an organic direction.
Although some older audiences had greatly appreciated those darker tones, DC still couldn't quite figure out how to tell a more mature story that newer, younger readers would love.
Event comics were still in their infancy, and it seems the critically acclaimed ones tended to be smaller, shorter reads that aren't actively sabotaged.
But early in the post-Crisis era, DC and critical acclaim mostly went hand in hand. DC wanted sales. They wanted to kill the competition.
The Cosmology prospered due to its meticulously detailed art, more robust writing styles, and a receptive fan base.
But DC just couldn't keep up with Marvel's sales.
DC's last stunt paid off well enough. Crisis gave people a clean jumping on point for DC Comics, subsequently fostering a new generation of readers.
So then maybe, just maybe, their next stunt could get fans new and old reinvested in one particular character. But if DC wanted to kill the competition, they were gonna have to kill one of their own.
Man of Steel has proven to be as vulnerable as the mere mortals who've looked up to him for more than half a century. Superman died Wednesday. East Greg Agnew reports on a world without the first superhero.
Even though practically everything we've talked about this episode is worth checking out, we would lose maybe a little comic clout if we didn't offer at least a couple suggested comic reads.
Marvel Comics resident Mark with a Mouth, Wade Wilson, is based on DC's Slade Wilson, aka Deathstroke. Sure, they are aesthetically similar, but we think Deadpool's hilariously irreverent, fourth wall breaking characterization is most akin to the obscure but beloved Ambush Bug.
The entire Secret Origins series may be worth checking out if you're interested in many of DC's smaller character origins post-Crisis. Having said that, issue number 10 and its 4 equally valid origins for the Phantom Stranger is a wonderfully meta homage to the anthology series the character debuted in the 50s.
The Watchmen might be DC Comics' magnum opus, but as we've mentioned, it hogs all the love.
If instead you want to see the revival of the character who inspired Rorschach in the first place, do yourself a favor and check out Denny O'Neil's The Question.
It just happened. You walked in my door, and now I don't want to be alone no more. Oops, I've done it.
If it feels like we've flamed a publisher or even a member of our audience, then maybe we should extend an olive branch to anyone that loves comic books, regardless of your sworn allegiance.
The Flash 54 has claimed to be among one of the best Flash issues ever published, which is no small feat.
There are very few comic book characters who ever surpass their predecessor in terms of popularity. And if you read the rest of Born to Run, you might understand why for many people, Wally West is the definitive Flash.
That just about does it for us this time, friends. Thank you again for giving us a shot here at the Comics Quest.
You probably know this by now, but we do give a free comic to our top comment with every one of these videos. What you might not know is all we want to be is the best comic book YouTube channel out there. I know, small goals. So please, if you liked our content, my symmetrical face, or Jackson's perfectly shined head, please tell your friends.
Alternatively, if you hate our videos, BJ's self-destructive path to capitalize on our passion, or my beautiful lumberjack beard, tell your enemies. Either way, we hope you have an excellent day, and to see you on our next Decryption of the DC Comics Cosmology.
One of our intentions with this project was to spotlight the entirety of DC Comics, not any single character.
That said, this is the point in time when Batman began to overshadow the entire DC brand. So, unlike many other characters, we will discuss a handful of graphic novels and miniseries that have worked their way into continuity out of sheer popularity.
Out of the goodness of our hearts, we're going to be vague, reductive, and maybe even a touch salacious, under the impression that you have either already read these titles and don't need us to tell you about them in further detail, or you haven't read them, and unlike all too many other morally bankrupt YouTube channels, we'll save the full experience for you.
Bear in mind, these stories are considerably darker or more mature than anything we've covered today.
In 10 Nights of the Beast, Batman meets his physical peer, the KG Beast.
But instead of beating him in time-honored one-on-one physical combat, Batman locks the KG Beast in a basement to starve to death.
Son of the Demon would prove instrumental for Batman's character progression in the 21st century.
The para-immortal Ra's al Ghul seeks an heir to his legacy, and Batman still won't fall for his over-the-top Ayn Randian bullshit.
Then, just to add insult to injury, Batman sleeps with Ra's al Ghul's daughter.
For those curious, the utility belt stays on.
Sure hope none of that comes back to bite Batman in the ass.
At first famously, now more infamously, The Killing Joke saw the Joker try to break Police Commissioner James Gordon's spirit with just one bad day.
Now you know where billions of edgelord memes come from. You're welcome. Yes, Joker blows Barbara's back out, and that's not even the misogynistic part of the story, believe it or not.
Regardless, even after the Joker paralyzes Babs, she and her father work through the incident. Barbara eventually assumes a new heroic role as the Oracle, the woman in the chair brokering information and pulling the strings for the grander superhero community, all while forming a team of her own.
But Batgirl is not Batman's daughter, so Batman comes out of the event more or less unfazed.
Feelings hurt, the Joker forms a long-winded scheme where he kills the second Robin, Jason Todd. We shit you not. Joker walks free by posing as the ambassador of Iran, thus giving him political amnesty from the American superhero, because any of that holds up in any court of law.
As morbid as it sounds, and it is fairly well known at this point, but fans and readers of the time actually voted in favor of killing Jason Todd, the second Robin, via phone hotline. The tragic results play out in a death in the family, even if the results may have been rigged.
Batman Shaman is set during Batman's first year in Gotham. Not only do we get an updated origin on the Batcave, and do we find out where that weird mask in the Batcave came from, but we also get to see Batman's true thoughts on Christmas.
In Batman the Cult, a cult of sewer hobos brainwashed Batman, and probably the darkest Batman story ever published.
After all of that, Batman's methodology becomes much more brutal, thinking with his fists before his brain. When a kid named Tim Drake successfully deduces Nightwing's identity, he soon finds out that Batman is Bruce Wayne.
After much deliberation, Tim Drake convinces Bruce Wayne child soldiers are all the rage again. And just like that, the third Robin is found in a lonely place of dying.
Arkham Asylum, a serious house on a serious Earth, is for Batman.
The most loneliest day of my life.
When Batman is confronted with the serious question, what right, if any, does a man dressed in a bat costume have to throw other people into an asylum for the criminally insane?
The Riddler remains among Batman's 4 most iconic rogues, but for most of the character's history, he was a campy weirdo with a noticeable superiority complex, probably some combination of ADHD and OCD, wrapped in a green singlet and topped with a bowler hat. The point is, he was never Jigsaw.
That is, until 1990's Dark Knight, Dark City.
Most Batman fans are probably familiar with Clayface at this point.
Any Batman fan worth their salt will tell you the 80s were a big decade so far as Batman in mud pits go.
And yet, few Batman fans will be as quick to tell you that Batman Mud Pact is a must-read for anyone with even a passing fancy in Batman's muckiest rogue. For a character that sure has appeared in a lot of Batman media, we can't help but feel deprived of more than a handful of excellent Hugo Strange stories.
Thankfully, Batman Prey is one of them.
In some respects, Strange is the Lex Luthor of Batman villains. He could never pray to hurt the man, but he'll do anything to psychologically torment the Bat.
The Last Arkham debuts mayhaps Batman's most twisted and frightfully realistic foe.
Voila! Now you know more about Batman. Hopefully we had some laughs along the way, and thankfully we don't have to talk about this character in great detail until next... Really? Both of them?
Don't act like you didn't know this was coming.
Alright then folks, you heard it here first. On our next episode of Decrypting the Cosmology of DC Comics, we're going to be discussing both Batman, the Nightfall Saga, and the death of Superman. We hope to see you there.